forward with introducing our next speaker. He brings over 25 years of experience in occupational health and safety, management, regulatory enforcement, and public sector leadership. He is the Executive Director of Occupational Health and Safety for the Government of Saskatchewan, a Canadian registered safety professional, and previously served as Chief of Occupational Safety for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Bryan Lloyd, who will present on Leading with Care, Managerial Behaviors that Build Psychologically Safe Teams. Please, thank you.
Hello, and thank you, Brandy. Congratulations to IRIOSH on this inaugural event. Very pleased to be able to be here today. Saskatchewan has always had a leadership role in terms of occupational health and safety. 50 years ago, we were the first jurisdiction in Canada to introduce occupational health and safety legislation. And really, we created the entire concept of the internal responsibility system that places responsibility on employers, workers, supervisors, all workplace parties to manage the health and safety of that workplace. So very pleased to be here and part of this event. The subject of psychological safety has been trending for the last 10 years as a key hazard that needs to be managed, and it's likely to continue for the next 10 years. This is a very, very important subject. There has been some regulatory progression as it relates to that. There's lots that still needs to do. So I'm going to kind of present the current state of where we're at in terms of the regulatory landscape and what the future may look like. So maybe next slide, Brandy.
Dr. Rafi, can you go to the next? Thank you.
I don't have the slides.
Oh, okay. I can maybe present from mine.
Yeah.
I have them in
So
the back here.
Yeah, perhaps you can just share the slide with us.
Sure. See here. Let me know if everybody can see that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to go to the top, start that again. All right, there we go. I think we're on track. You can see me, hear me, no echo. You can see my slides. We're good, right?
You're good,
All right.
Bryan.
Wonderful. So here's kind of the three topics that I'm going to present on today. One is an introduction to the CSA standard that we have in Canada to manage psychological health and safety in the workplace. I'm going to talk about the key cornerstone of that standard, which is the 13 psychosocial factors. And then I'm just going to introduce what we have in Saskatchewan available to employers in terms of managing psychological health and safety. So before I get into that, I just want to talk about the current state of where we're at in Saskatchewan and in Canada as it relates to regulating psychological safety. So as of right now in Saskatchewan, we really only regulate three domains that touch on psychological safety. All right, three domains. The first is harassment. So we have clear regulatory requirements that workplaces need to be free from harassment. Employers need to have a policy. They need to have a means of addressing harassment, investigating complaints of harassment, and basically rooting out any situations of harassment. So that's one domain. We know that workers, when they're bullied or harassed in any sense at the workplace, has a profound effect on their mental health. Number two, in our regulations, we prescribe violence in the workplace. So we require employers to have a policy on how to deal with violence in the workplace. Employers are required to have a violence prevention plan that identifies the hazards and the controls that they have in place to eliminate or mitigate situations of violence towards its workers. So that's kind of the third one, or the second one. The third is this notion of discriminatory action, which is really reprisals, or it's a prohibition against any worker being punished or disciplined or terminated for making themselves available to any occupational health and safety right. So really, that's the only three areas that we currently regulate psychological safety in the workplace. No jurisdiction in Canada really goes beyond that, but certainly what's been being examined at the regulatory tables is what can we do in the future? What can we look at for a system to compel employers to manage psychological health and safety? And when we look at that, really the best system out there, the best standard, the best option that we have available in the Canadian landscape is a CSA standard on managing psychological safety. So as of right now, it's not a prescribed regulatory requirement, but I know that all jurisdictions regularly consult on this, reach out to stakeholders, and examine the ability for this standard to somehow play a role in regulations. And somewhere down the road in Canada, I expect a jurisdiction to take that leap. Maybe not prescribe the entire standard, but maybe elements of the standard, or maybe impose the standard on certain high hazard industries or certain employers with, employees over 300 or 500 workers. Government of Saskatchewan, as an employer, is one of the larger employers in the province. We have 13,000 workers. We adopted the CSA standard for managing psychological safety as an employer. We weren't compelled to under regulation, but we looked at this standard and said, this is a good methodology. This is a good system for managing psychological safety. So we implemented this about 10 years ago. And essentially the program is called Healthy Workplaces. And we've gone through the cycle of implementing this standard and found it to be very, very beneficial as an organization. And when you look at the standard, what are the four main areas? You're going to have to identify risk. What type of risk? Psychological risk, risk of employees' mental health being impacted. There's a cost effectiveness element to it. It needs to make business sense. It needs to be viable. It needs to provide returns on that investment. There's a recruitment and retention element that we know in a tight labor market, and Saskatchewan has been a tight labor market for a number of years, that managing psychological safety can be used to keep the employees that you have, retention, and it can also be used as a means to recruit new talent to your organization. And then fourthly, there's a domain that covers organizational excellence and sustainability. So if you do a really good job at managing psychological safety, you're typically a high-performing employer. Inside that standard, and I encourage everybody on the call today to certainly take a look at this CSA standard, there's really 13 key elements. So in the standard, it breaks out these 13 psychosocial factors and says, as an employer, if you're able to manage these 13 psychosocial factors, you will reduce any mental health stressors that could negatively impact your employees. So we know that mental health belongs to the worker, but we can manage these psychosocial factors so that workers are healthy, in a good psychological position at work, their well-being's good, and they can contribute at a high level. And typically what employers do, and this is all outlined in the CSA standard, is you take these 13 psychosocial factors and you do a risk assessment and you come up with your top three. And then you focus on those top three. You develop some initiatives, a couple action items that you can work on in the course of the year. And then you reassess at the end of the year and you do your risk assessment each year. Every third year, you can do an audit. And that audit basically confirms where you're at, progress you've made, how you've improved conditions within those factors. So it's a really kind of systemic way to move forward. You don't have to tackle all 13 of these factors at once. You pick off 3, you make some progress, you reevaluate, and then you add to it, and you continue to work through these 13 domains. In terms of what does Saskatchewan have for tools, we have WorkSafe Saskatchewan, and that is a partnership between Ministry of Labor, so that's myself as the regulator, and then our Workers' Compensation Board. So that's our insurance body for insuring workers throughout the province. We come together and we create WorkSafe Saskatchewan, which is essentially the province's largest prevention bureau, where we've got information, education, tools, consulting services, all things prevention are kind of housed in there. Within WorkSafe Saskatchewan, we've got some very specific tools that we can use to assist Saskatchewan workplaces. The first is a safe leader assessment. Employers can go through this and basically determine where their leadership team is at in terms of their psychological maturity for managing PHS. We have a tool on building stronger workplaces based on the principles from the Canadian Mental Health Commission. Third, we've got some tools to assist workplaces in strengthening resiliency. And that is a big one these days. We need to ensure that our workers are resilient. We need to assist them in that. We need to manage that. Strong, resilient workers are more adaptable to change. They're more adaptable to some of the conditions that are imposed on them, especially workers that, as part of their jobs, are exposed to traumatic events. We need to manage their resiliency. We've got some tools on supporting employees' success. So again, through the Mental Health Commission, we got some workplace strategies on how to manage mental health within your organization, how to promote mental health, how to reduce the stigma, how to reduce those barriers, and just essentially promote good mental health within your workforce. There's other tools within that domain. I will say I think Saskatchewan has one of the most comprehensive toolkits for managing psychological health and safety in the workplace, and certainly encourage everybody on the call today to check out WorkSafe Saskatchewan's mental health toolkit and psychological health and safety toolkit. So really, that's what I wanted to cover today. I'll just kind of recap. We have the current regulatory framework, which means we cover harassment, we cover violence, we cover discriminatory action. And the future is likely some requirements around certain organizations who have high psychological hazards to manage those hazards in a systemic way, much like the CSA standard for managing psychological health and safety in the workplace. And thank you very much for my opportunity to be here today. Very proud to be a Saskatchewan public servant, and very proud of what Saskatchewan's done over the last 50 years in the domain of OH&S. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bryan Lloyd. That was a very powerful message, and I really appreciate we're identifying psychosocial risk, but you also shared some what can we do? What are some tools we can do? And I appreciate you highlighting and sharing, and it's just a beginning of what can be done. So thank you so much for that. In a direct response to the ILO's emphasis on supportive management. So there's a lot of supportive tools shared. Role clarity, how we can have fair processes and pillars to create a healthy psychosocial environment. Thank you.
Thank you.